To understand how the American education system developed, we must first look at the very first public schools and how they changed with the country. In 1635, the first public school was founded in Boston, Massachusetts. Largely focused around literacy, Puritan towns were required by law to provide their children with a basic education, namely so they could read the Bible. On a national level, the Constitution, while not guaranteeing the right to an education, enabled the federal government to pass both the Northwest Ordinance and the Land Ordinance, which both had clauses requiring states to provide education for their citizens. One of the major issues? African Americans would not have citizenship for nearly 80 years after. After the Civil War, the issue of educating newly freed slaves would pose a serious problem. During the years of Reconstruction, segregation became the solution to many societal controversies around race. In the years that followed, the South would function on the basis of separate but equal, the doctrine of the Jim Crow laws. As these laws divided the South, racism in the North led to segregated African American communities in some of the poorest areas, leading to a nationwide issue of segregation, be it de jure or de facto. It wasn't until 1954 in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka that Plessy v. Ferguson was overturned, declaring the unconstitutionality of Jim Crow laws. 10 years later, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which, among other things, ended segregation in schools. In the face of violent protests, black students throughout the South began to express their right to an equal education, with some of the most notable students being Ruby Bridges in Louisiana and Elizabeth Eckford of the Little Rock Nine in Arkansas. Today, our schools are significantly more segregated than any other time in the last 40 years, resulting in the urban migrant problem, the name attributed to low-funded and underachieving schools concentrated in urban and migrant areas. Children in these low schools receive an inadequate education, which lends itself to a host of other inequalities, most predominantly poverty. 21st century policies on education reform, like No Child Left Behind and the Common Core, have only perpetuated the problem further. These programs base federal funding off of student performance on standardized tests, put teachers and administrators' jobs on the line, and have seen little success in increasing the quality of education throughout the country. Research has shown that the most telling indicator of students' academic success is their family background and parents' level of education. If we compare education attainment, there is a clear disparity between races. What does this mean for the future? Looking first at average pay for level of education, we can see how students in poor communities attending low schools will become part of this cycle. Furthermore, there is a strong negative correlation between education achievement and incarceration rates, and within that, a substantial difference between races. While attacking greater issues of societal discrimination and poverty are central to equalizing education, providing low schools with the resources necessary to implement change is also imperative. If education plays such a vital role in teaching democratic ideals, enabling students to become productive members of society, and shaping cultural values, then something needs to be done about the vast inequalities plaguing our education system.